Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. You know what it means to be here at 9 a.m. or 9:01 a.m. by the time we actually get onto air. Good morning, everybody. Time for another show. Yes, Greg in the background already collecting examples of today's news captured from the wild, and we will update you on all of that. Yes, many things still happening. House of Representatives still unsettled. It won't be just any old acting Greg Dworkin pro tem that we bring in here, though. It'll be the genuine article to tell us about what the latest developments are, and or ask us to untangle what the latest developments are. I don't know exactly what we face just yet, although it's been laid out in front of me. I just haven't had a chance to comb through it just yet. But I see 15 messages at the ready here, so we'll go and sort it all out. Let's see. Oh, yes, look at this. Tips from Justice about what's on his mind this morning. Nancy Mace, much on his mind. We mentioned Nancy yesterday in her, I was going to say her weird hypocritical stance on, everything that there is to have a stance on. And so I guess it's not all that weird. It's actually par for the course for her. Yesterday's issue was her insisting that she voted against Kevin McCarthy because he wasn't doing enough to protect people from abuse and sexual assault, and to then turn around and endorse Jim Jordan, the facilitator of sexual assaults at the Ohio State University back when he was the wrestling coach there. Seemed a little odd, and she actually professed not to have any knowledge of ever having. I never heard anything about Jim Jordan. So, I can't actually believe that that's true. And yesterday, she had another publicity stunt on her mind. I guess on her way to the Republican conference meeting, at which they would try, I guess, to hammer out their issues about who would they nominate for speaker. I guess she's been getting a lot of flack for having joined the other cuckoo birds in voting McCarthy out, and I guess she's been, feeling political pressure in a political body. It seems unusual, but apparently this actually happened to her. So she decided, just like all Republicans these days, anytime they're in for some criticism, this is cancel culture. I'm being erased. I'm being silenced and censored. And so she showed up and made sure she got her picture taken wearing, I guess, what she thought was like a scarlet A, the scarlet letter. I don't know whether they actually read the book or not, and that's an interesting thing, too. But wearing a T-shirt emblazoned with a large red sans serif A. I mean, I don't know. I don't think we were ever assigned the scarlet letter, and it wasn't exactly pleasure reading. So, no, I never got around to it. And I have the same basic understanding. The reason I bring that up, though, is I did see a lot of Republicans saying, what is that she's wearing? And it's like, it's red. And I understand if you don't immediately go to scarlet from that, because scarlet's actually a different color. But it was a big red A, although we usually see it depicted as a more ornate sort of an A, and not big and emblazoned on your T-shirt like the Avengers symbol or anything like that. It looked like she was on her way to an Alabama football game or something, or she was a part of a group that was going to spell something out if they stood in the right order. I don't know. It was very odd, but that was her idea, the scarlet letter thing. And but she also confused a lot of Republicans because presumably the scarlet letter, they've banned it for whatever reason because it's about sexy stuff. So we can't have that. And so they banned the book, and so nobody got the reference she was making. But anyway, I thought it was interesting. I also, of course, recall that it was Nancy Mace boo-hooing that somebody once spray-painted an A on her sidewalk, and that was a terrible crime, whereas this horrific fashion faux pas, I don't know, it didn't look that bad, is, of course, free speech and awesome. USA. Anyway, so let's see. We got that. Plenty of other things. Oh, let's see what's going on with Tommy Tuberville. Of course, blocking all of the top military brass and mid-level military brass as well, and that, of course, affecting issues surrounding the stories out of Israel. But what's the let's see. Tuberville wants to arrest, is this right? The former CIA director for attempted murder by hyperbole. You never know whether he's in fact out to arrest former CIA directors or not. Trump certainly is. He's made a splash in the last couple of days calling for the execution of former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair Mark Milley. So we have that. Here's the story. So he sent me this thing. Tuberville reports former CIA director to Capitol. Okay. Let's see exactly what's going on here. Just briefly before Greg makes his way over with his raft of stories. Reports former CIA Director Hayden to Capitol Police over a tweet. And you got to watch out for those tweets. They're very dangerous. Let's see. Senator Tommy Tuberville reported former CIA Director Michael Hayden to the Capitol Police on Tuesday over the former general's tweet suggesting the lawmaker should be removed from the human race. Well, that's not very nice, but okay. Over at Twitter, he posted asking if the senator should be removed from the Senate Armed Services Committee due to placing holds on military promotions. Hayden responded, "How about the human race?" Tuberville, of course, has interpreted that as promoting politically motivated assassination. And it's not entirely out of left field to say that, but I think he was just basically saying you're not a very nice person and people should distance themselves from you and regard themselves as people and you as perhaps something else. But nah, yeah, wasn't very nice. I don't know whether it matters. I don't know whether the Capitol Police are going to care, but that is interesting. How sensitive they get about these things when they're usually guilty of the same infractions themselves. Anyway, Tommy Tuberville not doing himself any favors with his continued pattern of holds. Although I guess he can continue on for as long as large numbers of Americans, at least on social media, keep insisting that it's he's being a jerk, yes, but really the problem is that the rest of the Senate won't, quote unquote, do something about getting these holds undone or change the rules in such a way that people can't do this anymore. But it's actually quite complicated because it's a weird interlocking pattern of things that are in the rules and things that aren't in the rules, and remnants of rules that were changed along the way, but that leave sort of rump parts of themselves behind and interact with the workings of the Senate. It's not actually all that easy to undo. And, we've been through the logic of it before, but I guess as long as there are people running around saying it's really the rest of the Senate's fault for not doing this magical thing that I guess I think that they should do by clapping their hands and wishing very hard. It's their fault. And that just, and every time somebody says that, it's another day that Tuberville can survive with his holds. You should stop saying that. All right. Greg Dworkin is here, and as I said, this is not some, fly-by-night acting Greg Dworkin pro tem that we've brought in here. This is a genuine article, and we're paying big bucks for this, aren't we? Good morning.
Yeah, well, I'm getting paid just as much this year as I did last year. I'll put it that way.
Well, we're holding steady on our budget.
There's been no raise.
It's a CR we're working on. We're just paying you the same we were doing before.
And, I every time I try to figure out exactly what percentage of a raise I get, it comes out in error. I don't know.
But the taxes are low, so that's good.
Yeah. So here's a piece in Politico that resonates based on your introduction. The Senate is a problem in the Israel crisis. Democrats are fed up. The war in the Middle East means top military and diplomatic posts must be filled now, senators say. And the senators who are saying it is my senator, Chris Murphy. I think this will argue for a pretty significant reform in the nominations process. The military blockade put in by Senator Tommy Tuberville, Tommy Football, in protest of the Pentagon's abortion travel policy includes 2 picks for the Joint Chiefs and officers leading U.S. forces in the Middle East, 3 of President Biden's picks to be ambassadors to Middle Eastern countries, but I think that's Rand Paul or Ted Cruz.
That's true.
And his pick for the State Department's top counterterrorism job, that's definitely Cruz.
Yes,
so,
I don't know why they're
the
lumping
question
it all in
isn't
on
exactly
him. But
Tuberville alone.
that's
It's
true.
what are you going to do about the whole nomination process in the Senate, where one senator can hold up everything and the other senators don't want to change that because they love the power for themselves should they ever need it.
Well, yeah, that's one of the issues. Of course,
I think they have to change it. I think this is an impetus to do so, and some
you do it.
It is an ill crisis that blows nobody any good. So,
yeah, well, it certainly blows. We know that much.
Right. So maybe something halfway decent will come out of it. We'll see.
I think there probably will be impetus for change. It's just questionable what kind of change they can make. I mean, you'll recall that we when we had this problem in past years, people said, it's the filibuster. We got to get rid of the filibuster. And then we'll be able to, well, we got rid of the filibuster, quote unquote, got rid of the filibuster with respect to these nominations. There's no filibuster per se. That is what we mean here is, well, instead of making it 60 votes to be able to bring somebody up for nomination, we should just make it a majority. Just, majority rules, 50 votes. Okay, we will. Boom, done. And as it turns out, that didn't change very much because you can still block. And the fact is, yes, what we did was we changed the number that it takes to invoke cloture. What really needed to be done was, what is this cloture garbage? Why do we have to invoke it? How about what if there was automatic consideration after a certain number of days for every such nomination? Interesting.
Well, that's the thing there. What you really need to do is you need to change blue slips to pink slips.
Yeah. Well, that's up to you at the polls, except that, of course, it doesn't matter what you do at the polls. Now that you can make up fake electors, you can just send fake election results. I didn't lose. But, yeah, there are some serious structural problems with it. It's interesting because the cure, if there is one, isn't really all that clear when you start to actually try to game it out. Like if you really did say, well, the 10th day after the nomination, there has to be a hearing or something like that. That causes some enormous...
What is this blue slip nonsense?
Well,
why
that's
can't
for
you have
judges
something that
only.
says blue slips are effective for 90 days and then they're done.
I guess you could try and do something like that, except you'd have to make up a rule about something about which there's no rule. So you're asking to negate a rule that isn't there. Yeah. You could. Well, one, blue slips only apply to judges. Two, they do routinely get rid of the blue slip rule. When Republicans are running the place, they say, to hell with that. We're not using it. And then for some reason, when our, 85-year-old guy takes over, the Judiciary Committee, he says, you know what? I kind of like that thing from the 1800s. And so we replace him with the 60-year-old. I do it too.
Where do holds come from?
Holds are sort of a negative ghost left over from the fact that there's still a cloture procedure. All a hold is a threat to filibuster. You say, I want you to not take this up voluntarily. Don't put this on the floor. Because if you do put this on the floor, I will filibuster it.
Well, why can't you just do like a Tuberville can't filibuster for 90 days? Right. And then, you get stuff done. And then after that, it goes back to the way it was.
Well, yeah, this is where, like I say, the ghost of the rules. So I say, okay, you're right. Yeah, you should go and do that. Put that in the rules. So-and-so can't filibuster for 90 days. And then someone will say, what exactly do you mean by that? Should you refer to the section of the rules, the thing that he can't do? And you'll look and you'll look and you'll look and like, filibuster actually doesn't appear in these rules anymore.
No, we don't need to.
We don't need to. All I can say is...
We're not going to do that. And if you want to deal with the previous question, that's your problem. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
51 votes.
But even so, 51...
And if you don't
the
like
issue
it,
isn't...
Bring it up with the parliamentarians.
It is 51
we'll
votes.
Overrule her.
It already is 51 votes. The issue is, what does it take to get to the vote where you're going to have the 50... where you count to 51?
That's what we're going to have the 51 votes on.
Yeah, well, this is the problem. You say we've gotten rid of the...
We're going to have 51 votes on the concept of coming to 51 votes.
Yeah. Well,
and if you don't understand that, you don't understand the Senate.
And now you're saying, now you're asked, okay, not only is that ridiculous, and you have to have a vote on whether or not you're going to have a vote, and each of these votes take half an hour, et cetera, but you need to do it 400 times in a row.
Well, that's what happens when you vote on a rule, and then you vote on the actual concept. I mean, this is all the same thing. I'm a civilian. I'm not a lawmaker, and I'm not a lawyer, and it all looks the same to me.
And to the extent that people who are blaming others besides Tuberville and Cruz and Rand Paul are right about this, it's that they could, in fact, take these nominations up and process them and pass them. It's just that it will take days on end for each one of them.
Why can't they do them all at once?
You can make a motion to consider them en bloc, but guess what kind of motion this has to be? Unanimous consent. If you don't get it, then you have to make a motion to consider everything en bloc, and that is subject to debate, and it is filibusterable because it's a procedural motion and not a actual nomination. That's still subject to the 60 votes. You could try and get rid of that. Even so, you would have to count
really
to
bring
51.
Up the idea of getting rid of the filibuster. Could you talk to somebody about that?
I would like to think about that at some point. But yeah, one of the things that
get yourself a good mirror and have a nice discussion about people who have thought about this in the past.
Lowering the threshold from 60 to 50 does nothing to remove the necessity of holding that stupid vote. And of course, and I say ghosts left behind by previous rules, they lowered the threshold and walked away and said, we've done the job. And then they realized afterwards, well, there's all this other stuff that was related to cloture that's still on the books, like 30 hours post-cloture debate time is guaranteed, even when there's nothing to talk about. So even though you have a majority, you force the vote, you get the 51 votes, you got to sit around for 30 hours afterwards saying, yep, we agreed. Yep, we're going to do it. Here we go.
Right. So I'm the normal average American voter. On the one hand, I don't understand any of that, and I would like to blame Schumer. And on the other hand, I don't understand why everybody blames Biden for everything as if he has power to fix stuff.
Yes.
And I have those two thoughts in my head at the same time. I'm an average voter.
But Tommy Tuberville is so much jerkier and dumber that I would think it would be extremely easy to say, nah, that's actually the guy. And also the newspapers say
the
that's
answer
the guy.
is, some of this stuff's complicated and it's not so easily fixed.
Yeah, that's the bottom line of it. And I just wish that, I don't know, the whole world was the first 15 minutes of this show. We could just explain it to everybody, and then it would all be fixed. We'd all be happy and live in harmony.
So, speaking of procedural issues and structural problems, let's talk about House Republicans.
Those guys. All right.
This is Punch Bowl News. And remember, Punch Bowl News is the source for Kevin McCarthy. Right? It might as well be Kevin McCarthy News.
Okay.
And so what do they do now? So here's their first paragraph, the second paragraph. First paragraph is, today's a huge day for Republicans. The second paragraph is, we'll note this is as discombobulated and disorganized as the House GOP conference has been for more than 2 decades. That's a long time.
Wow.
They're leaderless, angry, upset over how they got here, and worried about what's next. There's backstabbing, bad blood, and mistrust evidence. After preaching unity for the last week, Jordan declined to say openly whether he'll back Scalise.
Oh.
And that may cost them some votes. Okay, let's go over what might actually happen today. Number one. There is a Scalise-Jordan proxy vote. House Republicans will vote on a proposal being pushed by Chip Roy and to a lesser extent Brian Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick's more of a, quote, moderate, all moderate discussions about Republicans, or in scare quotes like Nancy Mace.
Okay.
More on her in a
quote,
minute.
Unquote, Nancy Mace. We don't know if that's her real name.
Well, that's in scare quotes.
Yeah.
Chip Roy is ultra-conservative. They want to raise the threshold to bring a Republican candidate for Speaker of the House floor for a roll call vote only if you have 217 votes.
I see.
They're trying to avoid the embarrassment of 15 rounds.
That's a laudable goal, although I will just say that we just had a 15-minute discussion about how what you really need to be doing is lowering thresholds, but okay.
Well, but they don't have
it's
217 votes to do it. See, part of the problem is that Scalise and Jordan are effectively tied by not having 217 votes.
Well, yeah, even if they're not tied in the number, they're both equally unable to become Speaker.
Exactly. So where does that leave
so
you?
am I.
Well, interestingly, Jim Jordan likes the idea of going to 217 because that gives him time to get the votes he doesn't have. And Scalise hates the idea, and that's why they're calling it a proxy vote.
I see. Okay. I love it. I hate it. Let's vote on who's right. about it.
Scalise has been working to defeat the proposal, but Roy's proposed rule has more than 100 supporters. So even Scalise's closest allies understand he's likely to lose. And it's going to be that. And he can try to head this off by offering a vote at the table, but he's in a box here because it's popular. So you can't do like the stupid maneuvers you use against the opposition when it's your own conference.
That is interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
That's
one possibility.
Okay, he should let all his people know. Okay, I could stand to lose this vote, but that just means you have to turn around and support me. That much harder for Speaker in the next vote.
Another thing that could happen is Scalise wins.
The procedural vote, or
no, the actual speakership.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right.
Because they're voting in secret on it today, and it's a secret vote. And if it's a secret vote, basically, as one of the members put it, everybody's lying about who they're going to vote for. So we have no idea who's going to win, even if we don't get the 217.
Okay.
Or
I mean, they don't have that many.
Jordan wins, and if he does, you'll see the House GOP taken in a completely different direction. Jordan always says what he means. He always says what he means. He lays out his position, and he waits for colleagues to come his way. That's his style, according to Punchline.
Is that right?
So if Jordan's elected, there's going to be showdowns because that's what he says he's going to do.
Okay. All right. I can believe it in that sense.
No consensus. You come around to my way, and I'll hold it up until you do. That's his leadership style.
Okay. Maybe.
Or nobody wins. And then we don't have a speaker for a long time.
Yeah.
Now, if the Chip Roy, Brian Fitzpatrick proposal is adopted, the speaker candidate will be required to lock up 217 votes. That's the validation vote. First round is secret ballot. Conference move into questioning the candidate. If it still doesn't have 217 after another secret ballot, there's more questioning. Then there's an open roll call vote, and every Republican has to declare how they're going to vote. So that'd be really interesting. It's like it's 110, 110 secret ballot, 110, 110 secret ballot, 110 open ballot. A completely different result.
Yeah. Although what will really be funny is I'm curious about. I mean, presumably they have a secure mechanism for doing all of these things, but secret ballot. So everybody's vote is protected. It's all anonymous. And they'll open the ballots, and they're like, "This is weird." Okay, so Scalise has 475,000 votes, and Jim Jordan claims 1.7 million votes. This is unreal. I think we might have to attach names to these ballots after all, because there's only 220 of us. This is odd. I think there'll be a little ballot.
So there's secret ballot, open roll call. And then if the speaker doesn't have 185 votes, then the process starts again.
Oh, okay.
Now, according to Chip Roy's proposal, if they adopt it, and they may well, members can nominate other candidates after the third round. So after the first two rounds, if Scalise and Jordan don't have enough votes to win, they may nominate Patrick McHenry.
Okay.
Who's already in the acting speaker,
That's right.
Temporary president pro tempore on Wednesdays slot.
Right.
He's already got
cherry
that
on top.
And will it really matter?
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know how many people support him. It's an interesting proposal, this Chip Roy thing. It's also interesting from the party that, like, last week, and the same people who within the party who last week used to say everything needs to be decided by a majority of the majority. Now, this is a super majority of the majority. In fact, near unanimity of the majority is what it now takes to decide something. But I understand why they don't want to show up at the House floor vote for Speaker with a split conference and end up in the stalemate that they were in January.
But they have a split conference, and they are stalemate.
Yeah.
So
but they don't want it.
Jordan
You don't
wins,
understand.
It'll be because Trump endorsed him. The Republicans are just as right-wing as we say they are.
Yeah.
The entire country will see it. It's bad for their party. It's bad for the country. And it may be what it is. If Scalise wins, it's because there's a few more institutionalists who are silent about it, but they get to say so in a secret ballot. And let me add to that.
Yes.
Scalise probably picked up votes because Kevin McCarthy decided he was going to sort of run, or I'll allow myself to be seen to run, and then I said I'm not going to run, but in the process for the 8 hours that it might have been that I was running, I'm going to disrespect Steve Scalise. And Scalise's supporters all saw that and said, this is a quote, they are literally trying every dirty trick to F with Steve.
All right.
And so Scalise may have picked up a few sympathy votes from people who were just annoyed at McCarthy. So that's how he could win. But the likelihood is that neither one will win. Somebody's going to win at some point. I just don't know if it's going to be today.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think that they want to settle it at some point.
The other thing is, eventually,
Jim Jordan,
after they have their secret ballot, then whatever, we'll find out who's ahead. Who got more votes than the other person?
Allegedly.
And whoever that is, well, the third and fourth roll call. So whoever that is probably is going to be the next speaker. Because there'll be a tremendous amount of pressure to say, look, this is stupid. Just get behind whoever's ahead.
Yeah, George Santos.
Well, George Santos has issues. I don't know if you noticed this, but apparently he took the credit cards of supporters and then stole money from their credit cards. And last night he was indicted on it, and he actually left the conference and didn't really have a discussion with the rest of his buddies about what was going to happen.
Is that wrong? Is that bad now?
Yeah.
Okay. Should I not have done that?
Yeah.
So he took the credit cards of his
Seinfeld
supporters.
Congressman is, in fact, in Seinfeld levels of trouble.
Yeah.
At least George Costanza level.
I think they should let him vote and maybe even be the deciding vote for Speaker of the House. I'm just kidding, but they actually took me seriously, and I guess they're going to let him do that.
Right. Now, a couple of things that were asked, that got reported out are things like, was the 2020 election stolen? Both were equivocating on it. And what should we do with the CR and the approaching shutdown deadline, and nobody has any real ideas?
Okay. Leadership.
So, yeah, they're totally in disarray. They're children.
Right.
And, Biden's adult speech about Israel contrasted with them is like everybody saw that.
Okay. Well, I'm sure they'll settle it just fine and in proper order real soon.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Nancy Mace, she's a super jerk, as it turns out. But were we talking about her when we left, or did we just start that in the middle of our break?
No, that was the middle of the break. I think you mentioned her in the intro, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, her big scarlet letter shirt, not in this picture here that they're using in the New York Times that you just shared with me, but hopefully you all got a chance to see that fantastic Anarchy/Avengers
right, you mentioned
t-shirt.
Scarlet Letter is not an easy read, and I don't know why anybody signs it, but that's another story altogether. But I have been telling you for a while, I have been talking at you for a while about how Nancy Mace is not a moderate.
Yes.
And the reason that she was labeled as a moderate is when she was originally elected, the district that she's in was different than the district that she's in now.
Yes, so she
didn't move, but her district did.
What do you know? Yeah. So, right, she was in a place where she was sort of leaning Republican, but not solidly Republican. There's some blue pockets around there.
Yeah,
and so she
including
said,
Charleston.
I'm for, a couple of liberal things. I'm really not so bad. And they
I think this abortion thing ought to be something we talk about with each other. And then her district changed, and she changed with the district.
What?
Because she has principles.
I'm not sure what they were, but she had some of
Get
them.
reelected.
Yeah.
That's their principle.
So, yeah, now they have changed her district and made it considerably redder.
Hard right.
And now,
Considerably hard right.
Guess what?
Nancy Mace's district moved right, then she helped oust McCarthy. That's the headline in the New York Times. The Supreme Court will hear arguments Wednesday on Representative Mace's newly drawn South Carolina district, which has gotten redder since she was first elected. So it's fair to say, if the Supreme Court's going to hear this one after hearing the Alabama case, that she's now in a new controversial district. Mm-hmm. And given that she's in a new controversial district, she's decided to be controversial.
Oh.
So she's voting with Matt Gaetz. She voted to get rid of McCarthy. And in 2022, they're redrawing of district lines. Rural reaches like Cortesville, South Carolina, with their modest one-story brick homes, replaced the graceful mansions in black neighborhoods of Charleston. So Mace joined 7 hardcore conservatives and voted to oust Kevin McCarthy.
Well, I mean, that does explain it. And I guess that some remnant of her old district is in her new district. And I guess where people were shocked that she's, oh my God, she's actually hard right. Maybe that's who she was trying to address in those press conferences afterwards, where she said, I joined the ultra-right for leftist reasons.
Yes. Okay. I didn't leave my district. My district left me.
I've heard about this district. I guess we still don't have a map of it.
Yeah, I do. I put it
okay, excellent. But yeah, I heard that it was drawn with these weird sort of tendrils to it, but I don't actually see them in this image. But but I guess there are some places where
out Charleston and some of the stuff.
Yeah,
that's, right there in the
it
middle.
kind of loops around it. Yeah, that's how it's happening. But yeah, I've seen this happen in other states too, where they basically, there's another red population that they need to include, but it's not close to or contiguous with the current district, and you'll see that the district will include like an expanse of highway where there are no houses, but run up the corridors, the sides of the highway, and then encompass a large town hundreds of miles away. Not usually hundreds, but 20 miles of highway where it doesn't include anybody or change the balance between the districts by population, but just then capturing one last village in the Donbass or whatever and looping it into it. But all right. So, yeah, that's interesting that they gave her that much more red, and I wonder whether she had any input in the redistricting there and had either hoped that they wouldn't do that, or did she just say, I'm not making any inroads with the blue people, I need more red?
Well, she had a Republican primary challenge from the right in 2022 with a Donald Trump-endorsed candidate whom she beat.
Yeah.
And learned the lesson that criticizing or opposing Trump and the GOP would always be a trial. Mm-hmm. But voters in her district think it's all about the new map. Ms. Mace still calls herself an iconoclast, says the New York Times, but her transformation from denouncing the likes of Gaetz, Republican of Florida, to joining him in the first overthrow of a sitting speaker underscores a truism. Voters lead their politicians. Politicians do not lead their voters.
I see. Well, we have heard that.
Yeah, and that's true.
Okay.
So we have a Republican Party which is in disarray. We have moderates who really aren't moderates. We don't really know what's going to happen with them. It looks pretty bad for them. The moderates in the Republican Party have no power because they refuse to take power. I mean, basically, they could, they could change everything, but it would probably be the end of their careers.
That's all right.
And nobody wants to take a career-ending move and be brave. That's very brave of you, Congressman. Oh my God, what did I do? That's right out of Yes Minister.
Well,
that's an exceedingly brave stance. What?
Oh no.
What do you mean?
Well, get a job. It's a good economy.
Yeah, exactly right.
Go for it.
They could vote for they could vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
They could do that. That would end their careers.
That would end the career, but it would also end the problem.
True. And
but they're not interested.
It's not a good place to work.
And they're not interested in ending their careers. So that's why there's no speaker at the moment.
I do not understand. They could become lobbyists and be rich.
Yeah,
What's
they
wrong
could.
with that? I don't know
if they'd be hired as lobbyists if they did stuff like that.
Maybe not.
Because right-wing grifting.
Right. On the other
welfare
hand,
we used to call it.
Yeah.
Because like it's been around forever. They're not going to hire people that are not, consistent with their values.
Maybe it's just worth thinking about this as Democrats are being too logical. Let me try this approach. You can quit and become a lobbyist. Or you're worried about what you'll look like if you have a career-ending move. Tell people that you did not do that. And that that is socialist propaganda. And the truth is that you're the most conservative member of the House, but you just thought it would be great for America and possibly country music. I don't know.
Well, it's a problem for them because I don't know how many slots there are still available on MSNBC to hire ex-Republicans.
Oh. Yeah.
That's about the only place they can go. But not going on Fox.
We could just start a new network. They do that like every week. A fake network on the right.
But you have to pay them.
Well, to American News.
I mean, they'd be happy
that
to
will
go
be
on, but you have to pay them.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They are looking for cash. We could steal credit cards from our donors and use that money.
Right.
See?
So
I knew I could fix this. Thank you, George.
That's it. I mean, so we'll just have to see how that develops. Today is a big day, and we'll have to see how that goes. Joe Biden did give his speech yesterday. It was actually a pretty incredible speech.
Oh.
It was good. It was resolute. You didn't hear a whole lot of he's too old stuff after that. It was really excellent. In fact, people who don't like Biden said this is really an excellent speech. Nice. People like Michael Oren in Israel, who's a Netanyahu guy, who don't like Democrats.
But they're in the business now of collecting support. So good. All right. They recognize that. And nobody is crying about teleprompters anymore.
Right.
I miss the old days.
Those old days may come back tomorrow, but we'll see.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Haaretz and some of the other Israeli newspapers and other press are not pulling their punches when it comes to blaming Netanyahu for this whole mess.
Oh.
If you're interested in war news, I don't have a lot of war news. It sounds like Israel has secured the border. They haven't invaded Gaza on the ground yet. They're talking about what to do. Biden said in his speech he wants everything to be done by rule of law, which means you can't just go in and level the place, no matter what the bloodthirsty people say. And then there was a word put out by the White House that he called Netanyahu and told him the same thing, rule of law stuff. What does that mean? We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they have different laws.
But here's what the Israeli press says. This is it's another concept that implodes. Israel cannot be managed by a criminal defendant. Oh. A direct line runs between the judicial overhaul and the Gaza war. Netanyahu should emulate Begin and go. But we can't expect introspection from him. The future inquiry must investigate how much time the prime minister devoted to the reform and how much listening to the military leadership. There are all sorts of reports from Egypt about they told him he didn't listen.
They told him in Arabic. That's not going to work.
Which has been verified. Now, the question is, it's like the PDB about bin Laden, plans.
Sure.
This, that, and everything. How specific was it and all of that? He was told.
Okay.
And, what's also clear is that Netanyahu, by policy, maybe, had a lot of divisions of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, the army, on the West Bank because he wanted to protect settlers because that's what his cabinet wanted.
Because that's
which
who they
left
are.
The southern border with Hamas open.
Yes.
And what's even more clear is that for years he has been saying we need to support Hamas and make Hamas stronger because that's the way to decrease the authority on the Palestinian side, otherwise known as the Palestinian Authority.
Yes.
And so, he wants to work with the radicals to
which ones?
De-emphasize the moderates. He wants to work with Hamas to de-emphasize Palestinian Authority.
Okay, I thought you meant the Jewish radicals.
He said so. Okay. He made that policy. This is how it worked out. He's got all of that.
That's an incredible
policy. And because of all of that baggage that I just described, hearing from Egypt, having IDF in the West Bank instead of the southern border, and being unprepared, deliberately working with Hamas, all of those things make it, they're going to rally around him the way we did for Bush after 9/11. This isn't they are in us. It's not the same situation, and that's not going to happen.
It's funny because I could see where briefly, if you want to, you can see anything you want in any ink blot, obviously. I could see where they might convince themselves ahead of time, ahead of the actual facts on the ground as of this week, that no, we can do the same thing. No, we can't support Hamas and have people say, oh yeah, that was a brilliant strategy, because no, it'll be the same as it is in the U.S. and they'll rally around the president there. They'll rally around the prime minister here. No, but you won't, because you've been supporting Hamas. Well, they were arming the Taliban, and then well, okay, you have a point. Maybe it will work. It's so crazy, it just might work, but I guess not. It is an extraordinary thing. Maybe you think you'd listen a little bit. It's not all that often that Egypt calls Israel and says, you know what, you need to move the IDF closer to us. That must be, that's not their usual message. Maybe we should listen. What's going on?
So Giddy Whites writes in Haaretz, how depressing and upsetting it is today to recall Benjamin Netanyahu's arrogance under interrogation about Case 2000, one of the 3 corruption cases against him.
I like the name.
This is classified. Don't leak it, okay? Does that sound Trumpy? He said, flattering the police investigators with the magic lure of security secrets, and then he explained his doctrine regarding Hamas and Hezbollah. We have neighbors who are our bitter enemies. I send the messages all the time. These days, right now, I mislead them, destabilize them, mock them, and hit them over the head. The suspect then continued his lecture. It's impossible to reach an agreement with them. Everybody knows this, but we control the height of the flames. This arrogant worldview, so disconnected from reality, isn't the only thing that blew up in Netanyahu's face in hours on Saturday morning. The other concept that collapsed was one many good people warned about, the idea that the leadership of the state could be entrusted to a criminal defendant. History will judge everyone who lent a hand to this moral distortion. First and foremost, the defendant and his fanatic supporters, party colleagues, partners in the governing coalition, but also the media personalities and jurors who mobilized to kosher this abomination.
Kosher. Yeah, we should be running these editorials here, just like they do here, without names in it, and call into question whether or not it's insane to entrust the running of the country to a criminal defendant.
So the report goes on to say, effectively, Netanyahu's entire worldview collapsed over the course of a single day.
Yeah.
He was convinced that he could make deals with corrupt Arab tyrants, ignoring the cornerstone of the Arab-Jewish conflict, the Palestinians. His life works was to turn the ship of state from the course steered by his predecessors and make the two-state solution impossible. En route to the goal, he found a partner in Hamas. Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support Hamas in transferring money to Hamas. He told the meeting of his Likud party in March 2019. This is part of our strategy, this is a direct quote, to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. Where
that part I understand. I mean, as despicable as it is, I get that maybe that he thought there was some strategic value to it. I'm just sort of imagining, since we're comparing things there and here, running for office as an ultra-conservative here in this country and saying, we've got to support Hamas. We've got to support sending money to Hamas. And just
because
see how long
only Nixon could go to China.
Yeah, I guess. But didn't we have that as a fake controversy at one point here in the U.S.? Didn't somebody fake up a thing and was sending people checks? Friends of Hamas? Was it the Friends of Hamas or were they Hezbollah? I can't remember. But probably Hamas because it's easier to spell. And in the United States we go for that. But there was a whole thing where we're going to do a sting operation to see who cashes a check that says it's from Friends of Hamas. And meanwhile, it turns out the ultra-right Prime Minister of Israel is like, yeah, for Hamas. Awesome. And that's going to look a lot different now. Womp womp. Sad trombone sound.
So there you have it.
Or whatever they, is there an ethnically Israeli instrument that can make a sad sound like that? Well, they all make sad sounds because
I don't know.
It's a sad shofar sound.
No. Wrong.
Yeah, but it is a wind instrument, and the idea is the same. So everything's in a minor key in Israel. So
right,
okay,
it's a didgeridoo. You just read the name of the instrument from right to left. That's all.
Right.
So Israel-Gaza war. This is the New York Times. As scale of atrocities emerges, Biden condemns Hamas attacks as sheer evil. Speaking from the White House, President Biden said 14 Americans have been killed, and that some U.S. citizens are being held hostage. There was a lot of stuff circulating around 40 infants, some of whom were beheaded. That word comes from the IDF. It's not been confirmed by any international reporters because the IDF won't let them in the area, so it's hard to know what's going on with that. So I'm just assuming it's propaganda for the moment. but it's
I thought
not
they were
good.
bringing the reporters to the area and showing them, but only
They're showing them
international
deaths.
reporters.
They're showing them bodies.
Yeah, we don't know how.
But I don't know
it
that they've been
happened.
specifically
Okay.
showing beheadings. That's very difficult to nail down and actually see in writing.
I can't blame you, and no one would want to really be the one that documents that photographically, let's say. And but it did set off my my Middle Eastern NICU incubator alarm. That anytime there's the allegations by like an official arm, especially of the armed forces, that something terrible happened to infants en masse, and was done
which
by,
may well have. It's just that
it
we don't have
can
documentation.
happen. Yeah, I think back to that one and say how quickly we all went into believing that, and then finding out years later maybe that wasn't really exactly true. The atrocities are clear and open and documented across the board in other areas. There's no reason to think that this was a particularly humane terrorist attack.
No,
but
I mean,
yeah,
what we
I
do
get
know
your
is
point.
that
We'll
there's
watch out
over
for
1,000 dead people, and Hamas was responsible.
Yes,
and some of those
that
were
seems
kids.
clear, and that too is true. Definitely, I mean the settlements that they were attacking, a lot of kibutzers, obviously, is what that means. Not really, but yeah, there will be whole families there, and that's who they will kill. Whole families. It does happen. It did happen.
Just from a political
perspective,
which is the least important part of all of this, the kibbutzim tend to be somewhat leftist compared to the general Israeli population based on their origins. Mm-hmm. Socialist kibbutzim. But they've been trending right recently. There was an article about Haaretz about that. Based on security reasons. So in that sense, they were some of Netanyahu's voters.
Yeah,
and they're the ones that are most upset, of course, given what happened, about the breach in security. So again, when people talk about, well, people will rally around Netanyahu, not those people.
I guess not. And interesting that again we read things left to right, and they reverse it and read them right to left. So you have people out there, as you pointed out, they're trending right, and they go around saying, well, I'm a social conservative but a fiscal liberal. I live on a kibbutz, which is socialist, but I'm a security mom.
Yeah, I'm a social liberal, but I'm a security mom. Exactly. I mean, that's exactly right. And
Nancy Mace
comes to the army, I'm a conservative army person who's a social liberal.
Yeah, right. Who are they going to
vote for? So here's a New York Times piece on that. As war rages, Netanyahu battles for reputation and legacy. The horrors committed by Hamas on Israeli civilians are all but certain to mark Benjamin Netanyahu's legacy, no matter the outcome of the war. And that's true. I mean, so the idea, again, that they're automatically, because I see this online. I see this on Daily Kos when I write the Pundit Roundup. And although we tend to try to avoid Israel-Palestinian discussions, can't avoid this.
No.
And so, because of the many implications it has for American politics, and what happens is that, people will say things like, well, of course, just like here, won't that strengthen Netanyahu's business? No.
Yeah,
at least
it's
not
a very
if you
different
listen to Israelis.
Yeah, it's what do you know? It's a whole separate
country. How do you
and they have their own thing, and they speak the language among themselves that we largely don't understand, and they have their own issues and a different political system. I can't believe there's different results.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
On Tuesday, under pressure to do so, for example, Mr. Netanyahu struggled to try to negotiate a unity government that included some of his main rivals, most of them experienced military officers. But disagreements continued over the demands for a smaller security cabinet to administer the war, which would sideline some of Netanyahu's most controversial ministers, including a guy named Ben Gvir, who's like an out-and-out right-wing nutjob, and at least one other. And so the people coming at the government say, we'll be happy to form a unity government. We volunteered, not those guys.
Yeah. Huh.
And those guys are saying, we're not leaving.
But we're
stand.
Well, this is
Most
interesting.
assume Mr. Netanyahu will keep his post. But Moshe Yaalon, a former Army Chief of Staff and Minister of Defense, demanded Netanyahu pay the price of his failure and resign.
All right.
Amit Siegel, political columnist for Yedioth Aronoth, and one of the journalists considered closest to Netanyahu, said the prime minister could not escape blame for the systemic failure and for a policy of tolerating Hamas to try to stabilize Gaza. I can't tell when, but it will make very difficult for him to survive politically, said one of his allies.
Yeah, I mean, now it becomes clear, I guess, if you're having difficulty understanding it. Like, imagine sitting in the middle of this and saying, wow, my record is replete with statements on the record saying, go Hamas, loving the Hamas people. Yeah. Oh, who did this attack? Hamas.
This is a horrible massacre, and I just want you to know this is all part of the plan.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
You just have to be patient.
Now you begin to see how, well, maybe they won't rally around you. That would be unusual at this point.
Yeah, I'm just trying to set the scene so people have a sense of what's going on here.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm sitting there thinking, is Netanyahu pacing the floor in his house saying, I don't understand. He says, like, supporting all of the, supporting the Taliban, supporting Noriega, supporting all of these people that they suddenly turn against, and the record is replete with their support too, and yet they rallied around those presidents. Why not me? And I don't know. But maybe they read the news or something.
Right, and then there's other criticism coming out of Israel that Netanyahu was focused on the wrong parts of opposing Iran. He was too worried about the nuclear stuff, and he wasn't worried enough about Hezbollah and Hamas and some of the other proxies, and that's where his attention should have been, and he got that all wrong too.
Yeah,
so, he's in trouble. He's in political trouble as well.
That's true. So he's taking a hit on that one where now it begins to pile up. I mean, you're not wrong worrying about nuclear weapons ever, but I mean, I don't know. I guess it's a question, can you divide your attention? And did he? And I guess if he didn't, then, or if he gave them an outright pass on it because he thought there was some other policy benefit, well, your theory was unsound, sir, and now you'll have to live with it.
Right.
Okay.
So, in other words, the Biden-led Americans say that your theories on the nuclear stuff in Iran actually made a nuclear weapon more likely, not less likely. Well, and on the other hand, you completely ignored the stuff that actually caused a massacre. So you have nothing.
Yeah, I mean, right. If you were able to come out of it and say, well, we were successful in the part we concentrated on. Well, you weren't. Oh. Well, there was,
anyway, just trying to give you a sense of the flavor of how the discussions are going there. So don't assume that this is all going to benefit the Netanyahu. He did it on purpose.
What about John McCain?
He wants to manipulate people into supporting him. It doesn't work that way.
Or at least it can't. It'd be very difficult to imagine in this case. And this is good. This could filter through as we come to a pretty. I don't see how you could fail to understand it once you get all of that in front of you, that it will be complicated and difficult to predict. But, odds are he doesn't look too good for him.
Right.
And it hasn't.
So one last thing to mention before the segment is done, and that's just a little bit of a word about social media.
All right.
And it seems like given the misinformation, disinformation, and outright anti-Semitism and other stuff that's going on Twitter, ex-Twitter, Zitter, however you wanted to describe it.
Yeah, right.
Really sparked an exodus of people saying, okay, I've had it, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And whereas they've set it up until now, and some people are still staying, and it's still a reasonable, if you have good filters and good lists, place to try to get current news. It isn't what it was. And a lot of the philosopher pundits, the historians, the academics are leaving, and they're going to Blue Sky.
Yes.
And a lot of the journalists are leaving, and they're going to Threads. So there isn't one place. Yeah, so there isn't one place that has everybody who's leaving. There's Mastodon. A couple of people have gone there, including you.
Yes, I've gone to both.
But my view of looking at all those places, that Mastodon isn't really growing and thriving compared to the initial, everybody's going there. I don't go on Spoutable that much, so I really don't have any comments about it. Have an account, but just not there that much because, you can't do 4 things or 5 things. But I am on Blue
poorly.
Sky and I am on Threads, and they're different. They're both a whole lot nicer than Twitter, but each continues to have its flaws. Neither one of them, for my purposes, for example, are embeddable on the Daily Cost Pundit Roundup. Only Twitter is that. Neither of them have direct messages so that you can hear directly from some of the sources. Only Twitter has that. So I still keep Twitter for those things.
Yeah.
But, if I want to see breaking news and see journalists, I go to Threads. And if I want to see what the academics and political scientists are saying, or if there's science news that I want to follow or medicine or something like that, then I go to Blue Sky.
Yeah. What about if you want to see cats?
If I want to see cats, you can see that everywhere.
No. Okay. I'm just checking.
But cats and dogs
big
still is
for
on
people.
Twitter.
All right. That's good news. And
Threads is banned in some places in Europe because of association with Facebook. And so you don't have a complete and total picture there. But I do have, some of the European politicians and pundits are on Blue Sky. So, again, you got to go to both places to create what you could get in one place at Twitter. On the other hand, it's a much nicer experience.
Yes. Okay. Well, I do hear a lot about that. I did see something today that indicates that Threads may be limiting its usefulness for the news function, which is odd because if all the journalists have gone there. But apparently Threads leadership actively interested in tamping down on the use of Threads as a news feed.
They said that originally. I don't know where they stand now, since that's where a lot of the people wound up. They said that on the day it opened.
Oh, all right. I thought
they
that
said,
was
we don't really see this as a news place. We just want it to be Instagram, except for like Twitter.
Yeah, all right. I don't know what that means, but and they were also very
you have to
brands
have an Instagram
and celebrities
to get there, and they were hoping it would be pop stuff, popular culture.
Okay, so that might be something they thought of at first.
They wanted those cat pictures you were talking about.
Okay, so let it be Cat Central. So that may no longer prevail.
No longer be true.
Okay, no, this statement is no longer operative. Okay.
That's what Ron Ziegler said.
Yeah, but did he say it on Threads?
No, he said it on Twitter.
So it's not going to work.
It's on Dick Nixon's account. I could send it over to you.
Okay. Well, I think that explains a large swath of what's happening in the world in just under an hour.
So choose your own adventure.
Okay. I choose the continue tomorrow. How about that?
All right. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yeah, okay. I don't think I knew, or I think originally when I went to Blue Sky, I couldn't find Greg on Blue Sky. I knew where he was on some of the other things, but now he's officially there. He was, I guess, probably officially there the whole time, and that's of interest to me because I have been putting the podcast posts up on Blue Sky and on Mastodon. I didn't stop doing it on Twitter stopped me from doing it at some point. So anyway, but when I do that and I say that he was on the show, I ordinarily will use the address so that you can find him and follow him. And I couldn't find him the first time I looked for his address, I guess, to include on there. But so in the Blue Sky announcements of the podcast, I just use his name. But now I can use his address. And it's easy enough to find. And it's, of course, exactly the address that you thought it was going to be, Dem from Connecticut. And then plus whatever garbage you have to put at the end of your Blue Sky thing right now. bluesky.social or whatever. All right. Other things to round up. Oh, look, here's, I'm looking at the Twitter. And I had seen the still photo of Nancy Mace in her Avengers uniform. But here is some video, which Molly Jong Fast labels as embarrassing. And I'd like to hear it. I don't know. Maybe, can I, it's 25 seconds. Maybe I can pocket it and play it, and then we can see what's so embarrassing about it. But also embarrassing, by the way, many other things. Now I feel like we should go to the Nancy Mace thing, I guess, first. But right next to it is a reminder of something I saw last night, which was kind of also weird and embarrassing, that NYC Southpaw likewise says is weird and odd or did last night. But while we're still on the subject of Israel, there was the effort of the Italians, I guess official Italian officialdom there, noting its stance in solidarity with Israel, as everybody is doing these days. We stand with Israel, and tweeting out on this Twitter channel that they maintain, Italy in Israel. Italy in Israel? Israel in Italy? Italy in Israel? I don't know. Anyway, I guess some sort of Italian-Israeli solidarity type thing. So, yeah, Greg knows what I'm talking about here. So, one of the things that you sometimes see when the Germans are interested in standing in solidarity with various people, they sometimes will light up or project things onto, say, the Brandenburg Gate, right? So I think that was maybe the inspiration for this. So the Italians figured, we will project the Israeli flag onto some equally iconic surface and perhaps light up a city landmark with, colored lighting, as you sometimes see, as Greg points out, the White House or the Empire State Building. Occasionally other, iconic buildings and landmarks around the country will do this. So they decided, well, I guess this is how this must have gone through. We're Italy, and our capital is Rome, and we need a large iconic surface, preferably light in color. We have a lot of marble. Maybe we'll do that. But projecting things onto, say, like a marble column. Well, that's difficult. That's very narrow. We need a large expanse of marble or something like that. So they used, they have a lot of different surfaces they, I guess, could have chosen. But they decided on the Arch of Titus in Rome, which, you may or may not be familiar with the Roman city. I'm not, but I am familiar with this. And they have those arches, and, ancient Rome, they would build these things as part of their celebrations and triumph parades. And you'd get an arch if you were an awesome guy and they were having a triumph march for you. And Titus, to the Roman mind, was one of those guys. So here they have chosen the Arch of Titus to project the Israeli flag on, to light up with blue and white lights. The thing is, since, ancient Rome, much on everyone's mind these days, apparently, because there's some sort of weird meme circulating that conservatives, are insisting that they're constantly thinking about ancient Rome. I don't know whether they gave this any thought. I don't know whether the Israelis or the Italians gave this any. I don't know what Italy and Israel is as an entity, but they chose to project their support for Israel and the Israeli flag on the Arch of Titus, and it just so happens that the Arch of Titus was built for, you'll never guess, Titus. And Titus was having his triumph march because he was just returned from the sack of Jerusalem and the destruction of the Second Temple there. And the marble carvings decorating the arch are scenes of the sack of Jerusalem and carrying off treasures from the destroyed temple. So it's kind of a weird place to stage your We Stand With Israel thing, but also brings up important points about the statute of limitations for retribution for atrocities in between two peoples. Whereas, for instance, let's see, some supporters of the Palestinian people were insisting, for instance, in the initial aftermath of the attack, being reported in English language newspapers as an unprovoked attack. And of course, people saying, well, now, hold on just a minute. What do you mean by unprovoked? There may not have been something in the immediate past of the last week or so, but the history, okay, yes, understood. I mean, bad thing that happened, poorly executed in many ways, to say the very least about it. But, the idea that it was unprovoked, well, open to question. Then, of course, the question, and they would say, and this goes back decades, they've been doing this forever, but it's been a kind of continuous, so, it's a little easier to understand. Whereas, just as a thought experiment, you might ask, what if the Israeli army were to say, You know something? Still pissed about that Second Temple. We're bombing the Colosseum. Well, people would say, gosh, time has passed here. Or there are no real, genuine Romans left. Nobody speaks Latin, for instance, on the street or something like that. I don't know. Where would you, I guess, if you're looking for a line, you could draw that one and say, that's too far in the past. However, if you wanted to reopen a wound like that, you could use the Arch of Titus, let's say, for demonstrating your support for the state of Israel. Just an odd thing to have happening in the world today. I don't know. Anyway, goodness, what a move. Anyway, let's see what speaking of embarrassment, we'll see if we can play the video of Nancy Mace. And if there's any way that we could make her look foolish by playing audio of her on the show, we should try and do it. Let's see. I'm going to turn up the sound on this and rewind to the beginning. Let's see what she had. I don't even know what she said, except that she was wearing the Avengers uniform.
I'm wearing the scarlet letter after the week that I just had last week, being a woman up here and being demonized for my vote and for my voice. I'm here to let the rest of the world know and the country know I'm on the side of the people. I'm not on the side of the establishment. And I'm going to do the right thing every single time, no matter the consequences, because I don't answer to anybody in D.C. I don't answer to anyone in Washington. I only answer to the people. Thank you. I'm wearing this.
Well, okay. Then it's embarrassing and that it's very trite. And of course, the whole Scarlet Letter thing was a bit of a dumb stunt and whatever. And it's probably not that you're a woman that they're upset with you for your vote, but you never know. I mean, you can't write it out entirely. So what the hell? We'll give it a shot. The Avengers version of the Scarlet Letter thing was a little bit weird. I have to admit that does look a little ridiculous. Okay, we'll get rid of this thing, pow, and then move on to the rest of the show. Although, let me take a look at Greg's notes. Although he does have a chance to come back tomorrow, I feel like we may have skipped over a few things. But let's see. Is this? We got some news here. Oh, no, we already got this one, I think. The bit about the reshuffling or the possible reshuffling of the cabinet there in Israel. All right, well, let's see. We'll take our cues then from the other stories that he suggested, plus what we had socked away in pocket. Oh, I need to alert everybody. There's a ProPublica alert for the day. Last week, middle of the week, we were alerted to the fact that ProPublica had put together another of their deep dives, this time into Leonard Leo. And I was kind of excited to share some of it with you, even though I was afraid to start reading the thing because it could take me 15, 16 days to get through this. But then it turned out that the "We Don't Talk About Leonard" headline that they were touting was attached, in fact, to a podcast in which they discussed their reporting. But now a print version, I guess, is in circulation. I've told you in the past that Pocket sometimes gives you an estimated read time on some of these articles. And it's usually for me, it's about twice as much to get through something because you stop and you make comments and you pull other things and whatever else. But this one weighs in at 43 minutes. And so, I mean, yeah, that would probably take an entire show to read all the way through, but I am sure you will find it worth your time. Or if you have insomnia and you need to do something with your time while you're up, I don't suggest that the piece will put you to sleep. I suggest that you will not have wasted your time staying up and reading it. So We Don't Talk About Leonard, the man behind the right's Supreme Court supermajority. Doubtless worth your time. It would be worth our time, too, except we just wouldn't get to any of the other stories we have to share with you. So the news that Greg was forwarding me about, basically, it's a confirmation of, now a confirmation of what he was sharing in terms of predictions and speculations for what was going to happen. I think, if I'm reading this right, for the Israeli cabinet, the thought being, yeah, they'll probably bring in a war cabinet with more experienced military leaders, and to make room for them, they'll instead shunt aside some of the crazies that Netanyahu made space for in his cabinet in order to cobble together that right-wing West Bank settler-centric cabinet. So the crazies are out, as it turns out, for the war cabinet. And the latest being this tweet telling us that Benny Gantz and his party have agreed to join Israel's government, forming an emergency government. A new war cabinet will consist only of Netanyahu, the guy who screwed the whole thing up, but we're stuck with him, I think, Gantz, and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, with Ron Dermer and Gadi Eisenkot as observers. Takes the crazies away from the top table. So what are we talking about? 1, 2, 3. That's a cabinet of 3 with 2 people as advisors. Who's out? Ben Gvir, and he was the Minister of National Security. He's out, I understand. I think the defense minister, is he the same guy? Yeah, he stays, but he wasn't all that fantastic either. But Ben Gvir was the Kahanist that we've mentioned in the past, and the nuttiest of the nut bars that they had. So anyway, there you go. That's how they fix it, right? The guy who screwed everything up over a series of decades stays, and the guy who's always been screwy for decades but has only had a chance to actually put his fingerprints on screwing things up for the last year or so is out. So, make of it what you will, but it's difficult moving onto a war footing to say, you know what, rebuild everything from the ground up and get rid of the prime minister as well. You wouldn't want an acting prime minister pro tem in the middle of a war, and even though you're stuck with Netanyahu, you're stuck with Netanyahu. So let's see. To tie things together a little bit between Israeli and domestic politics, I guess I can offer you this. The Daily Beast has this piece in, it's in the Daily Beast, obviously, but I need to reload it so I can check the authorship. Nicholas Grossman is the author of Trump's Overrated Peace Plan Helped Enable the Horrors in Israel and Gaza. I had to reload it because the pocket version misattributed the authorship here. So, all right, let me see. All right, and there's more messages from Greg I want to keep up on. Okay. Found the GOP House roadmap to get out of the mess. And it says, you're in a maze of twisty little passages, all alike. Well, that's not going to help them get out of anything, but that's the joke. All right. Let's see. More, huh? Okay, let me check in on this stuff, see if there's what's developing here on the Twitters. Yeah, okay, here it is. Emily Brooks and her flow chart. Here is how the House GOP rule change proposed by Chip Roy to get support from 217 members for Speaker and nominee works. The aim is to avoid a floor fight. First order of business today. It's very complicated, but I think Greg explained it correctly. But here, this is a chart that he actually must have prepared about it. So it's his own work plus the language of the amendment. Although, quite honestly, I think we got a pretty good view of it from Greg. But we can discuss it some more tomorrow, or perhaps after we sample this piece from the Daily Beast. Trump's overrated peace plan helped enable the horrors in Israel and Gaza. We should read this in parallel with the very interesting insights we got about Netanyahu and his approach to dealing with Hamas in Gaza and enabling it. I mean, it's just kind of a shocking thing for people who only hear smatterings of Israeli politics once in a while to hear, the right-wing prime minister of Israel is actually like actively pro-Hamas in usually the sort of thing that you say, oh, that sounds like fake news that you would make up about somebody because it sounds so impossible. But, not pro-Hamas in the way you might think, but still, Well, anyway, what about the U.S. role in all this? And I think you should read this alongside, for instance, the claims being made yesterday by various Israeli officials and cabinet ministers, most of whom are now out, saying dumb things like, well, the reason we had this attack is that the Shin Bet and the domestic security services are infiltrated by the deep state. Except, well, they were actually enabling a policy of empowering Hamas. So to the extent that there was a deep state, it's Netanyahu. And yeah, I guess. But anyway, I was just weirded out by the seepage of Trumpist language into the Israeli cabinet. But I guess there's more seepage than we might have thought. Even though, Trump was just the president and his son-in-law was his personal envoy to the Middle East. And so I guess we shouldn't be surprised. All right, let me read you this piece from the Daily Beast. No American president caused Hamas's surprise assault across the Gaza border that killed over 900 Israelis. Mostly, of course, they're just talking about the nature of the attacks, in deliberate, brutal attacks on civilians, including 260 at a music festival, and kidnapping about 150 more. But, so he's saying no U.S. president is to blame in particular for this, but U.S. policy, especially the Trump administration's, contributed to the unsustainable situation that made an outbreak of violence more likely. How so? Let's read. Claims that, quote, Trump brought peace to the Middle East, whose claim might that be? Obviously Trump's, are almost an inversion of reality. What? I can't believe that Trump's claims are an inversion of reality. He shifted U.S. policy fully in Israel's favor, reducing support for the Palestinians and treating their quest for statehood as something that could be ignored, and shaped the regional context by heightening confrontation with Iran without strategic benefit. All right, so it's divided into sections, as these stories often are. Ignoring the big problem is the first one. Let's start with Trump's relatively most positive contribution. That's an interesting way of putting it. The Abraham Accords, the deal that normalized relations between Israel, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, opening flights that sent tourists to each other for the first time. My recollection in hearing about that for the first time was kind of a so what, who cares? These are not states that border Israel, and though there was traditionally hostility because they were Arab states, normalizing relations between them didn't seem to me to do anything about the main source of tension between Arab states and Israel, which is, of course, the Palestinians. But that's a hard problem. So they decided, Jared Kushner did, I guess, not to solve that one. But instead, I have friends in Israel, and I have friends in the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and I guess Bahrain and all these other places that I like to, one that I tried to borrow money from, or two where I tried to do deals. But there are rich people who recognize me as a fellow rich person, and we get along. And then in Israel, there are people who we get along with because they're both rich and also Jewish, and I guess that's a tie as well. And can't I find some way to get my friends to get along? Well, yes, you can. And won't that be considered peace in the Middle East? Because some of my friends are Jewish Israelis and some of them are Arabs from other countries. Sure, that's a peace between Israel and Arabs, right? And I facilitated it because we all went to brunch together. So therefore, peace plan, boom. But yeah, right. Even on the surface of it, where are the Palestinians in all this? Oh, I don't care. Oh, I mean, all right, I guess, except as it turns out, not all right. So all three of those countries, Bahrain, Arab, UAE, and Israel, are small, wealthy American partners that oppose Iran, making an agreement easier. It's not necessarily easy, but easier. Bahrain hosts the U.S. Navy's Central Command and the Fifth Fleet. The Trump administration greased the skids with the UAE by authorizing F-35 fighter jets and Reaper drone sales, making them the only country in the Middle East besides Israel with advanced stealth aircraft. But whatever you think of that price, more peace is a positive development, if only there was some, and could provide a stepping stone for a wider Arab-Israeli deal, as the Biden administration has been attempting with Saudi Arabia. But lying about the Abraham Accords and stretching them into the dawn of a new Middle East and playing them up for an American domestic audience was emblematic of Trump's larger failure. He threw America's weight behind Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's squeeze and ignore approach to the Palestinians, as if the fundamental problem of people displaced and living under occupation would just go away. Trump officially recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moved the U.S. Embassy there, breaking American policy since the 1979 Camp David Accords that treated the city as disputed, given Palestinian claims to a capital in East Jerusalem. Trump cut $25 million in U.S. support for Palestinian hospitals and $200 million from the UN Relief and Works Agency that has helped displaced Palestinians and their descendants since 1949. In early 2020, Trump's son-in-law and White House advisor, Jared Kushner, put out a, quote, peace plan that mostly proposed just giving Israel what it wants and dismissing Palestinian concerns. Meanwhile, Israel expanded settlements into the West Bank, along with the corresponding military and policing presence that defends settlers from violence, including when the settlers commit some of that violence. On the other half of the Palestinian territories, Israel kept Gaza under blockade and fought occasional wars with Hamas. The Israeli government moved further and further right, pursuing West Bank annexation, and the two-state solution, which was never that plausible to begin with, became more and more of a pipe dream. That describes the last decade and a half since Hamas forcibly took control of Gaza in 2007. Trump gave Israel things it wanted without getting anything in return, and encouraged Netanyahu's sense that Israel could build international relationships, cultivate partnerships with Arab states who share fears of both Iran and jihadists, and ignore the Palestinians. But the Bush and Obama administrations essentially punted on the issue, increasing military aid, albeit with varying levels of criticism. For example, Israel bristled when the Obama administration abstained rather than vetoed a UN resolution calling for an end to Israeli settlement building, but certainly didn't object when Obama authorized a $38 billion package of military assistance to Israel, the largest in history. Next up, unignorable violence. Now, Hamas has conducted an impossible-to-ignore attack. The size and brutality of the assault means the logic of national security has taken over. No state would tolerate this. And the Israeli military will try to root out, or at least significantly weaken, the organization behind it. First step is regaining control of border towns, clearing out Hamas infiltrators. Israeli forces have reportedly killed 1,500 fighters on their territory. Airstrikes in Gaza are already underway, and hundreds of Palestinians there are dead. That will surely rise into the thousands, especially if Israel conducts extensive ground operations, as appears imminent. Some of the dead will be civilians, including children. Israel takes steps, allegedly, to reduce civilian casualties, but a large number is an inevitable consequence of IDF assaults. They're not going to be able to avoid it, right? Especially in densely populated Gaza City, as Hamas takes cover among the civilian population. Israel will likely go in hard, searching for Hamas fighters, leaders, and equipment, and rescuing hostages if they can. Hamas and other Palestinian militants, such as Islamic Jihad, will probably try to draw Israeli forces into urban areas and inflict maximum casualty via ambushes, including with booby traps and tunnels. Small, inexpensive drones give them the ability to spot Israeli movements or attack targets. As determined and technologically advanced as Israel may be, urban warfare in a densely populated area against a prepared enemy will be difficult and costly. The United States will back Israel, with President Biden promising assistance and efforts to ensure no enemies of Israel believe they can or should seek advantage from the current situation. That's the quote. The U.S. Navy moved a carrier group into the eastern Mediterranean, presumably as a warning against other states getting involved. Russia. Wink, wink. America is rushing Israel interceptor missiles for the Iron Dome air defense system. You had to figure that was coming next. And munitions for offensive operations. The U.S. has long designated Hamas a terrorist group and, like many others, seems appalled by the latest attack, which more resembles an ISIS-style massacre than the rocket barrages that killed fewer than 10 Israelis in the worst year of such attacks. I got to prepare for our exit into the next break here. We had the wrong things queued up, but there we go. Time for the music. More an ISIS-style massacre than the rocket barrages, which ultimately didn't kill as many, or fewer than 10 Israelis, or in the worst year of such attacks, or the commando operations that snuck under the border in a tunnel and kidnapped an Israeli soldier. It's been mostly small scale that way. Depending on how the fighting goes and how the hostage situation unfolds, Israel could need more military aid from the U.S., which would require an act of Congress. Remember them? Will we be able to do it? Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with our reading of the Daily Beast piece here. We left off in noting that, Israel will almost certainly need more military aid from the U.S., which would require an act of Congress, but the House currently in turmoil, lacking a speaker due to the Republican majority's dysfunction. Just to bring things back to reference a frame of reference so we understand domestic politics. Next up, regional war. Could it spread? The other big short-term concern for America is whether the Israel-Hamas war sparks a wider regional conflict. A lot of that depends on how much Iran was, in fact, if they were, in fact, involved in Hamas's attack, and on what Hezbollah does. And I understand, having read bits and pieces of things over the last couple of days, that Hezbollah, based in Lebanon, has taken advantage of the situation and, engaged in some exchange of fire in the northern border region as well. Nothing to the scale that Hamas has done, but there's some question about whether they might say, the gates are open, maybe we ought to give it a shot. And who knows, if they've redeployed armed forces from the West Bank toward and oriented them elsewhere, it's probably toward Gaza and not, say, the northern border. Is there an opportunity for Hezbollah to launch a strike as well? The Iran-allied militants based in southern Lebanon, Hezbollah, who fought Israel to a stalemate in 2006, likely were not involved in Hamas's assault. I don't know who says so, but apparently that's the conventional wisdom. But they could open a second front in the war as Israel attacks Gaza. The border situation is uneasy, as a small contingent from Palestinian Islamic Jihad attacked from Lebanon, killing an Israeli soldier. Israel fired back into Lebanon, reportedly killing 3 Hezbollah members, and the group fired rockets back at Israel, but didn't kill anyone. So I guess more nuance. That exchange of fire, how did that happen? I could see that causing a problem. Hezbollah is stronger than Hamas and would pose a difficult challenge, especially with Israel already engaged in Gaza. The IDF called up 300,000 reservists, a large rapid mobilization for a country of 9.3 million, and deployed some to the north in case Hezbollah acts, but at least for now, the cross-border firing is limited, on par with other exchanges since the 2006 war. And Hezbollah is closer than Hamas to Iran, which means Tehran is a big factor in whether the fighting goes regional. The Wall Street Journal published an exclusive claiming that Iran helped plot the attack and gave Hamas a green light. However, an IDF spokesperson says they're continuing to investigate but haven't seen evidence that Iran, quote, was involved in the planning or training. Anyway, the U.S. says similarly, while both Hamas and Iran denied that Iran directed the attack or knew about it in advance. So a big question mark there. That signals that none of those parties want a wider war, if it's true, I guess, unless evidence emerges that Hamas's assault ultimately came from Tehran. Israel will likely focus on Palestinian militants, and the U.S. will work to avoid a regional conflagration rather than start one. Nevertheless, Iran does supply Hamas with weaponry and expressed support for them after the recent attack. They're both part of an axis of resistance against Israel, the U.S., the West, and to some extent Saudi Arabia, along with Syria, Hezbollah, and Iraqi Shia militias. With this many volatile relationships involved, there are multiple ways the war could spiral, even if none of the major players want it to. Here, too, Trump's foreign policy put the U.S. in a worse position. In 2018, he unilaterally broke the Iran nuclear deal, which the Pentagon and American intelligence said Iran was following, letting Iran out of nuclear restrictions in exchange for nothing, and angering U.S. allies. In 2019, Trump moved towards war after Iran likely was behind attacks on 2 commercial tankers in the Gulf, but offered to negotiate at the last minute, and when Iran declined, called off the attack anyway. The U.S. had already started conducting cyber operations against Iranian defenses, revealing which systems America had penetrated for what turned out to be Trump's unsuccessful bluff. That doesn't sound very good, does it? In early 2020, after U.S. exchanges with Iran-backed Iraqi militias and a riot at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, Trump ordered the assassination of Iranian Revolutionary Guard General Qasem Soleimani. Remember this? The first direct attack on a foreign military commander since World War II. Soleimani had a lot of blood on his hands and constituted a legitimate military target in Iraq, given his involvement in the threat to the American embassy. But the strike prompted the Islamic Republic's first ever open attack on American forces, firing missiles at a U.S. base in Iraq that injured over 100, but luckily killed no one, giving the U.S. an off-ramp from escalation. Killing Soleimani ultimately yielded no strategic gain, as other Revolutionary Guard leaders moved up a spot and operations continued. I don't know what we thought would happen there. Kill a military commander, they'll find another one. The one lasting effect was Iraq falling under more Iranian influence. Elsewhere, the Trump administration backed the failed Saudi-led attempt to blockade Qatar, which did little besides pushing Qatar closer to Iran, and seemed driven more by an effort to line Jared Kushner's pockets than advance any coherent American interest. What do you know? Later, Trump's chaotic, haphazard approach to Syria screwed over America's Kurdish partners, embarrassingly yielded U.S. bases to Russia, and ended up improving Iran's position. Interesting. Weirdly handing over U.S. bases to, of all people, Russia. That seems so odd. Biden has played the weakened hand Trump gave him with a mix of force and diplomacy, ordering airstrikes against Iran-backed militias along the Iraq-Syria border, maintaining post-JCPOA sanctions, while trying to get Iran to agree to new nuclear restrictions, which may be impossible since Trump gave Iranians good reason to think America won't honor any commitment. and securing the release of 5 Americans held prisoner by Iran. Republican critics, such as Representative Mike Lawler and recently ousted Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy, accused Biden of some responsibility for Hamas's attack because Iran got $6 billion in unfrozen funds as part of the prisoner deal. But that doesn't make sense. The money was Iranian, not American, and came from oil sales to South Korea authorized by Donald Trump. It will be held in a Qatari bank, available only for humanitarian goods, and Iran hasn't used any yet. Now, money is fungible, and that's always a good point. I like to make it myself. So Iran could shift funds to weaponry while anticipating the budgetary boost. But given the size and sophistication of Hamas's operation, there's no way they started plotting it last month when the deal went through. Reuters reported that Hamas's plot was 2 years in the making, and few to any Biden critics say they wish those 5 Americans were still in Iranian prison. But on Israel-Palestine, Biden let the status quo fester, first focusing on COVID and ending America's 20-year war in Afghanistan, and then on Russia's invasion of Ukraine and broader geopolitical competition with China. I mean, they're legitimate priorities, right? In July of 2023, the Biden administration expressed concern over Israel's far-right governing coalition's divisive effort to increase their power by overhauling the Israeli judiciary, but didn't go beyond verbal criticism. Now Hamas's attack and Israel's response have grabbed America's attention, while dashing hopes that gradual economic improvements would lead Hamas, and especially Palestinians who do not closely support them, to prefer relative stability under occupation over militancy. In the short term, Biden's task is clear, albeit challenging. Support Israel's security while trying to minimize harm to innocent Palestinians. Keep the war from turning into a wider conflagration with Iran, and manage the regional instability Trump left in his wake. But the longer-term Israel-Palestinian situation is a tragic mess. It's easy for outsiders to imagine an end state that sounds fair to them, but no one knows how to get there. So, I mean, as long as we're dealing with the Biden blame game, it's at least, I think, of some interest to include the fact that there's plenty of blame to go around and there's no reason to leave Trump out of it. In fact, there's good reason to lay a lot of it at his feet. Okay, let's see. Other things to catch up with and other comments made here. Oh, Justice tells me having some tech issues. Oh, dear. Okay, that may mean that those tech issues will get in the way of the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy bringing you a new episode for the day. But there will be some substitute programming offered, apparently, Netroots Radio. So if you stay tuned out of habit, you will find, well, 1, you'll find out what he has on tap for you, and 2, you won't be left hanging if it's your habit to hang around here after our show is done. And it should be. All right, let's see. Other things to share. Some of these things are, the headlines aren't visible because of the way Pocket has been, improved over the past year or so. Let's see. Let's see. These were reminders to myself about stories we've already talked about, Nancy Mace and the Arch of Titus. But here's another thing. Once again, back to domestic politics and back into the congressional maelstrom. I was impressed to see that. I mean, obviously, you would think the timing is right for something like this, and we indeed have gotten the response we were looking for. There via NBC News, former Ohio State University, that is the Ohio State University, former Ohio State University wrestlers say Jim Jordan betrayed them and shouldn't be House Speaker. So, of course, he needs every vote he can get to stay in this contest, and this is exactly the right timing and pressure point for people to, revisit the story and make their point here. Do you really want a guy in that job who chose not to stand up for his guys? Said one former wrestler who attended OSU when Jordan was assistant coach. So what's going on here? Corky Simasco is the reporter on the NBC News piece. 4 of the former Ohio State University wrestlers who have accused Representative Jim Jordan of failing to protect them from a sexual predator. And remember, that's a big issue among the right wing because they're constantly sexually predating sexually on themselves and others. Because every Republican accusation is in fact a confession. Anyway, 4 of the Ohio State wrestlers who've made these accusations about Jim Jordan's time when he was team's assistant coach in the 1980s and 90s said Tuesday he has no business being the next Speaker of the House. And that's some quote. Do you really want a guy in that job who chose not to stand up for his guys? Said former OSU wrestler Mike, is it Schick? Schyck, one of the hundreds of former athletes and students who say they were sexually abused by school doctor Richard Strauss and have sued the university. Is that the kind of character trait you want for a House Speaker? Like separately from the notion of the sexual abuse, with which Republicans in the House have had an enormous problem. I mean, after all, Jim Jordan would only be the second Ohio-based, well, not Ohio-based, right, where Hastert was from, but the second Republican wrestling coach to facilitate or at least look the other way about sexual abuse of his wrestlers to become Speaker of the House in like whatever number of years. It's 10, 15 years. You know, only 2 in that time. It seems like a weird anomaly that they keep coming back to corrupt, sexually abusive wrestling coaches, the Republicans. Anyway, but separate from that issue and their focus on we got to do something about the vampire pedophiles that are plaguing America, and then it turns out that they're facilitating all this sexual abuse. But even if it was something else, the idea, do you want to put your trust as, you know, you Republicans who are going to cast the votes that make this decision, do you want a guy in that job who has chosen to abandon the people he was supposed to be taking care of? Do you want him to be the guy who you put in a position of taking care of you, knowing that his habit in the past has been throwing his charges under the bus in order to advance himself? Do you want that in a Speaker? You shouldn't, but it's up to you. Anyway, the wrestler's decision to weigh in adds a new dimension to the Speaker's race, bringing in a controversial part of Jordan's past that continues to hang over the Ohio Republican and staunch ally of former President Donald Trump. So far, the OSU affair hasn't received much focus, which is a remarkable thing. One GOP congresswoman recently said she wasn't even aware of the allegations. And by the way, you'll know, I mean, we made mention of it, right? But in case you've forgotten, that congresswoman who said she wasn't even aware of the allegations, the super genius, the very politically astute and attuned Nancy Mace said she wasn't aware of the charges. She was aware of the charges. She just didn't want to answer for them on television. Anyway, this could continue to follow Jordan. Even if he becomes Speaker, there's a chance he could be deposed in one of the lawsuits. That is to say, give a deposition in the lawsuits, and that would put him in trouble. But that could also see him deposed from the Speaker's chair, for instance. Jordan is the only declared candidate. Is that right? Competing against, oh yes, the only declared candidate. I'm like, what about Scalise? He's declared, right? He's the only one other than Scalise. Okay. Anyway, the House Speaker, also second in line to the presidential line of succession after the vice president, also important if he's a facilitator of sexual abuse. Dunyasha Yetz, another former OSU wrestler who has publicly and repeatedly accused Jordan of lying about not knowing what Strauss was doing to the athletes, said the congressman's hypocrisy is unbelievable. He doesn't deserve to be House Speaker, Yetz said. He still has to answer for what happened to us. Rocky Ratliff, former OSU wrestler and alleged Strauss victim, who was also a lawyer representing some of the plaintiffs suing the school, said Jordan abandoned his former wrestlers in the Ohio State sexual abuse scandal and cover-up. Jordan, who won Trump's endorsement because Trump loves people who facilitate sexual abuse, and has used his post as chairman of the House Judiciary Committee to aggressively investigate President Joe Biden and his family, has repeatedly denied any knowledge of sexual abuse by Strauss when Jordan coached at OSU from 1986 to 1994, including overhearing any locker room banter about abuse. Jordan's spokesman, Russell Dye, denied the congressman knew about the abuse while working at OSU. Chairman Jordan never saw or heard any abuse, and if he had, he would have dealt with it, Dye said in an email. Another former OSU wrestler who has been only identified as John Doe in the lawsuit said he believes Jordan is qualified for the position, but was reluctant to endorse him. That's interesting, too. My problem with Jimmy, is that he has been playing with words instead of supporting us, Doe said. None of us used the word sexual abuse when we talked about what Doc Strauss was doing to us. We just knew it was weird, and Jimmy knew about it because we talked about it all the time in the locker room, at practices, everywhere. Strauss, who died in 2005, was accused of preying on hundreds of men who attended the university from the 1970s through the 1990s, mostly under the guise of performing medical exams like hernia checks, which require a doctor to examine a patient's genitals, as many of you already well know. OSU has admitted it failed to protect students from Strauss and has already paid out $60 million in settlement money to 296 victims. And in June, the U.S. Supreme Court stymied OSU's attempt to dismiss the remaining lawsuits against the school. Jordan was mentioned by name in the complaints filed with the federal court for the Southern District of Ohio in 2019, and he was also mentioned in some of the earlier lawsuits. In a 2019 lawsuit, John Doe 23, there are several, says that he was present when other athletes were discussing Dr. Strauss's intrusive exams and that these discussions occurred in front of Coach Hellickson and assistant Coach Jordan. Ratliff, who along with Schick and John Doe is part of the remaining lawsuit against OSU, said he plans to depose Jordan and have him testify under oath that he was unaware that Strauss was abusing students. His locker was just a few spots away from mine and was near Dr. Strauss, Schick said, and we were always talking about Dr. Strauss. There's no way he didn't know what was going on. Ohio State found itself on the defensive after a whistleblower, former OSU wrestler Mike DeSabato, came forward in early 2018 with allegations that Strauss molested him and some of his teammates during physicals. But the Strauss scandal did not become a national story until July 3rd, 2018, when DeSabato and several other former Ohio State wrestlers told NBC News that Jordan had refused to help them take on OSU, and that Jordan was lying when he insisted he had been unaware of the alleged abuse by the team doctor. Yet, in the NBC News report, said Jordan had to have known. He said that when he went to Strauss with a thumb injury and the doctor tried to pull down his pants, he immediately told Jordan and then head wrestling coach Russ Hellickson. He said he then went in to speak with Strauss. Schick, Ratliff, John Doe, and several other former wrestlers of all said Jordan was aware that the athletes referred to Strauss as Dr. Cough, because every time they went to see him, he insisted on checking for hernias. It was an open secret, Ratliff said in an early interview. Everybody talked about Strauss. Everybody knew if you went to him, the first thing he would do is take down your pants. Everybody knew he was taking unnecessary showers with the team. That's the incredible part. Like, why does the doctor need to shower with the athletes? He does not. He does not. That would be an immediate red flag. His locker was near Jimmy's locker. Why does the doctor have a locker? Jordan, who in 2018 was being touted as a possible replacement for then Speaker Paul Ryan, responded with repeated denials even after DeSabato and other wrestlers came forward to say that Jordan couldn't have avoided the rumors because it was all over the locker room. The embattled congressman also enlisted the help of a conservative group and Hellickson to help line up other former OSU wrestlers to provide testimonials on his behalf. In 2019, an independent investigation by Perkins Coie law firm concluded that coaches and athletic administrators at the university knew for 2 decades that Strauss was molesting male athletes and other students, but failed to sound the alarm or stop him. All of the coaches and administrators' names were redacted in the version of the report released to the public. Jordan's then communications director, Ian Fury, insisted the report absolved the congressman. Schick said he is a Republican and that before the scandal erupted, Jordan was somebody I revered, somebody I looked up to. He put himself in this position, Schick said. If early on he jumped in on our side and validated what we were saying, what everybody knew about what Dr. Strauss was doing to us, then this wouldn't be happening. But he decided early on, for reasons I still don't understand, that he was going to deny knowing anything about this. Now he's got no choice but to stick to this story that he had no idea what Dr. Strauss was doing, even though it's a lie, Schick said. So it's good to see that they're out and back again and attempting to hold him to account. So let's see. Other stories that I need to share with you. There are many. Maybe we try this one from, do we go to Madison.com, the Wisconsin State Journal, and I think they've got the same story here. Yes, I have both the AP's filing on the issue and, although I don't know where it's running, it's, is it just on their site? I guess so. Yeah, on the AP news site. But all right, the local papers have, I guess, validated it by picking up the AP story. Former Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice advises the Republican leader in the legislature there against impeachment. Which impeachment? The impeachment, of course, the proposed impeachment of Janet Protasewicz. So, what's happening here? Scott Bauer reporting for the Associated Press, there should be no effort to impeach a liberal Wisconsin Supreme Court justice based on what is now known. A former justice advised the Republican legislative leader who asked him to review the issue. That's interesting. So now this is out and on the public record. Some Republicans had raised the prospect of impeaching newly elected Justice Janet Protasewicz if she did not recuse herself from a redistricting lawsuit seeking to toss GOP-drawn legislative district boundary maps. On Friday, she declined to recuse herself. I guess that step has now been taken. And the court voted 4-3 along partisan lines to hear the redistricting challenge. Assembly Speaker Robin Vos had asked 3 former justices to review the possibility of impeachment. One of those 3, David Prosser, we've heard his name before, right? Sent Vos an email on Friday, seemingly just before Protasewicz declined to recuse, advising against moving forward with impeachment. That was after a state judiciary disciplinary panel rejected several complaints lodged against Protasewicz that alleged she violated the judicial code of ethics with comments that she made during the campaign. Prosser turned the email over to the liberal watchdog group American Oversight as part of an open records request. To sum up my views, the quote from the email says, there should be no effort to impeach Justice Protasewicz on anything we know now, Prosser wrote to Vos. Impeachment is so serious, severe, and rare that it should not be considered unless the subject has committed a crime or the subject has committed indisputable corrupt conduct while in office. Vos, on Monday, made his first comments about Protasewicz since she declined to recuse from the case, and Vos got the email from Prosser. In his statement, Vos did not mention impeachment. He did not return text messages Monday or early Tuesday seeking further comment. Vos raised the threat of impeachment because he argued that Protasewicz had prejudged the redistricting case when, during her campaign, she called the current maps rigged and unfair. Vos also said that her acceptance of nearly $10 million from the Wisconsin Democratic Party would unduly influence her ruling. Protasewicz on Friday rejected those arguments, noting that other justices have accepted campaign cash and not recused from cases. She also noted that she never promised or pledged to rule on the redistricting lawsuit in any particular way. Democratic Governor Tony Evers on Tuesday filed a motion to intervene in the redistricting case. Other justices, both conservative and liberal, have spoken out in the past on issues that could come before the court, although not always during their runs for office like Protasewicz did. Current justices have also accepted campaign cash from political parties and others with an interest in court cases and haven't recused themselves, but none of them have faced the threats of impeachment. In my view, corrupt conduct is not a term that is open to a mere political grievance, Prosser wrote. If that were the case, legislative bodies could be trading questionable impeachments with considerable frequency. Prosser cautioned that using impeachment to delay or affect the outcome of any single case will be viewed as unreasonable partisan politics. It's a, pretty solid warning. Prosser, a former Republican Assembly Speaker, was the only one of the former justices who came forward to say that they were on this panel created by Voss. But the records he turned over to American Oversight show that he was also apparently working with former Chief Justice Patience Roggensack on looking at impeachment. The group had filed a lawsuit alleging that the panel Voss created is breaking the state open meetings law. How do you like that? That's another wrinkle in the whole thing. Justice Prosser's opinion letter demonstrates why Speaker Voss's secret panel needs to operate in public, said Heather Sawyer, American Oversight's executive director, in a statement. We still don't know everyone involved or what other work Speaker Voss's secret panel is doing. And we will keep pressing to ensure that the people of Wisconsin have full transparency and accountability regarding the Speaker's impeachment plans. All right, they have a point here, but at least they're getting what they need, and what they need turns out to be Republican opinion against the wisdom of pursuing the impeachment. That's the real news here. Text messages to Roggensack, from Roggensack to Prosser on September 14th show her asking if Prosser is free for a meeting. Prosser also released a voicemail from Roggensack, left that same day, referring to that text and asking to speak with him on a matter I thought we were going to look at together. All right, so some internal strife there, perhaps. But the important news coming out, even former Republican members of the Supreme Court say this is a terrible idea.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
That seems pretty important. Okay, so as I mentioned to you, technical issues will get in the way of bringing you a new West Coast cookbook and speakeasy today. No idea, not even in Justice's mind, at least at the time they informed me of this, what will be coming next. He's probably got some clear idea, and he'd better, because he's given out 30 seconds to find it for you. We'll see you tomorrow.